Hello, so today we're going to be learning about the electronic structure of atoms, or rather how electrons are arranged around an atom. Now we already know how to find out the number of electrons in an atom, and that is the number, it's the atomic number, which is our protons, and we know that an atom has the same number of electrons as protons, and that means that it has an overall neutral charge. We're not going to worry too much about ions at the moment. We can work that out later. And we know that electrons orbit. So electrons orbit the nucleus. Now we found out when we looked at Niels Bohr, when we looked at the history of the atom, that he determined that electrons orbit the nucleus in different energy levels, or shells. So the shells are different energy levels. And there is a very easy way of working out how the electrons are arranged in their shells. We have a very, very simple order. In the first shell, we have just 2 electrons. We have 2 electrons. In the second shell, we have 8 electrons. And in the third shell, we have another 8 electrons. Now this first shell is the lowest energy level. Our second shell, we have a higher energy level. We've increased it. We've increased it from the first shell up to the second shell. The electrons have a bit more energy to orbit in that shell. The third shell has an even higher energy level. We're just constantly moving up through energy levels. Now when we fill in the electron shells, we always have to fill this one in first. It must be completely full before we can move on. So if we only had 2 electrons, they would have to go in this first shell. If we had 3 electrons, we couldn't just put them all in the second shell or all in the third shell. We have to fill up the first shell first. And the first shell always has 2 electrons. So we have those 2 electrons, more than 2. We'll be filling that up first and moving on to the next ones. If we had 6 electrons, we'd put 2 in the first shell and then we'd get 4 in the second shell. So we have 2 and 4 makes 6. Gives us the total, and we fill up the first shell completely and starting to fill up the second shell. We can't move on to the third shell until we've filled up the second shell, so this must be full as well before we can move on to the next one. Now we're going to look at how we draw them as well. So we'll start off, we're going to have a look at lithium. So if I find lithium on my periodic table, lithium is here, Li. I've got the number 7 and 3. Number 3 here is my atomic number, the number of protons. Number 7 is my mass number, which is my protons and my neutrons. We're just going to focus on this one for the moment, my atomic number. It's the number 3. That tells me I've got 3 protons, so I've also got 3 electrons. Now when we're drawing this, we're going to start off, we're going to draw an L and an I, so it's lithium. We're going to draw the symbol, and we know we've got 3 electrons. So we need to arrange them in there. Now you might be thinking, I'll just draw 3 electrons around it. And remember, we can't do that. Our first shell has got 2 electrons, and we've got to fill it up before we can move on to the next one. So we're going to draw a ring around it. This is showing our shell. And we're going to draw our first 2 electrons. Draw them with crosses. We'll have 1 there and 1 at the bottom. This shows us we've got 2 electrons. I've drawn 2 so far. I need to get a third one. Now you might be tempted just to go, I'll just put a cross there and that's all 3 done. We can't do that. Remember, that first shell can only hold 2 electrons. So we're going to need to draw another shell. We'll draw another ring around it, and we'll add in our third electron, again with a cross up there. I've got lithium, and I've got 3 electrons. I've got 1, 2, 3. I've got 2 in this middle shell, on the first shell, and 1 on my second shell. Next one we'll have a look at will be carbon. So I'll find carbon on my periodic table, which is here. I've got an atomic number of 6 and a mass number of 12. I'm just going to focus on the atomic number. I've got 6 protons. This means I've also got 6 electrons. So I'm going to draw it again. So I'll draw my C. I'm going to write there I want 6 electrons so I don't forget. And I'm going to draw my first shell. My first shell there is the ring around the C. And in my first shell, I'm looking up again, I can only have 2 electrons. So I'll do 1, 2. That's 2 done. I've done 2 out of my 6. I've still got 4 more to go. So I'm going to draw another ring around it. I've got 4 more to draw. I'm going to draw them at equal points around it. So I'll have 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I've got my electrons. I'm going to count them to make sure. I've got 1, 2 on my first shell, and 3, 4, 5, 6 on my second shell. This gives me a total of 6 in total. 2 on the first shell and 4 on the second shell. Next one we'll look at sodium. So sodium, I find it on my periodic table. I'm looking here, got sodium here, my atomic number is 11, my mass number is 23. So my 11 tells me I've got 11 protons, I've also got 11 electrons. My symbol is Na, so I'm going to write Na here and 11 electrons here. So I remember to draw my 11 electrons. I'm now going to draw my first shell, and remembering that in my first shell I've got 2 electrons. So I'll do 1, 2. In my second shell, so I've only drawn 2, I've still got 9 more to go. 11 take away 2 is 9. I need to add in another shell. So I'm going to add in my next shell, and I'm going to start adding them in. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm just going to count them up to check how I'm up to so far. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've only done 6. I've got 5 more to go. Do 1 there, 1 there, 1 there, and 1 there. I'm going to count them up again. I've got 1, 2 in my first shell. And now 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in, or 8 in the next shell, which gives me 10 in total. I've got 2 and 8, which is done. I check back. I've got 8 electrons in my second shell. I filled it up. I can now move on to my third shell. I'm going to draw a third shell. Now, so far, I've only drawn 10 electrons. I need 1 more. I'm going to draw it up there. I'm going to count them all up. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And that matches my 11 electrons there. So that is how we draw our electron structure. We can also write it a special way as well. And we write down the number of electrons in each shell. So for lithium, I've got 2 electrons in my first shell. So I'm going to write the number 2. I've then got 1 in my next shell. So I'm going to write the number 1. This is my electron structure for lithium. 2, 1. We're now going to look at carbon. Again, I've got 2 in my first shell. I can draw a 2. I'm going to count up in my second shell. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I've got 2, 4. It's my electron structure for carbon. I'm now going to count up for sodium. I've got 1, 2 in my first shell. I'll draw number 2. My next shell, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I've got 8, so I'll write the number 8. And in my final shell, I've got 1. So my electron structure for sodium is 281. Now you should have a worksheet with you as well, which is this one, the electron structure of the first 20 elements in the periodic table. I would like you to have a go at filling them all in. There are some questions here as well. So the first one is asking you to draw it. The second one is to write the electron structure, which is what I've done here, my 21, 24, 281. And the next part is to what do the elements in each group have in common? So we have our groups going down here. What do the elements in each period or row have in common? So going across here. And then it's asking you to draw and write out the electronic structure for a sodium ion and a chloride ion. So you have to think back to the previous lesson on how an ion is different from the atom. Very sorry that I can't be with you today. If you have any problems, please do ask your cover teacher to email me and I will respond as soon as possible. Have a good day.